Asia is home to the most species of deer, and Europe arguably the most influential, but it is the Americas that exhibit the extremes in terms of size, hosting both the largest and the smallest species, and is where our journey into the world of cervids begins. The northern Pudu is generally considered to be the smallest deer species in the world, weighing no more than between 13 to 20 pounds depending on source. In addition to its size, the northern Pudu can be differentiated from the southern Pudu by its dark black facial mask in addition to its distribution. The northern Pudu is found between Colombia, Ecuador and Peru, where a new species, the Peruvian Yungas Pudu, was described in 2024. To the south, the southern Pudu is found between Chile and Argentina, a species for which there is thankfully much more information. The southern Pudu, or Pudu in Spanish, is the world's second smallest deer, exhibiting a similar weight to another South American species, the Dwarf Red Brocket, both of which are not far off several small Asian deer that we'll meet later on. The males of the species have antlers, which are just as small and heartwarming as you might expect, whereas females do not, a trait they share with most other deer species. Coat colour can vary both from season to season and between individuals, but is generally described as a reddish-brown. If you're wondering what a baby Pudu looks like, gestation lasts between 200 to 223 days, or roughly 7 months, after which most often a single fawn is born and will stay with their mother until independence is reached at 8 months of age. The southern Pudu was last assessed in 2016 when it was upgraded from vulnerable to near threatened, and although there is no population estimate published, there are thought to be upwards of 10,000 individuals, although this is trending downwards. Being found mostly in the Patagonian region of South America's southwest coast, the southern Pudu has the second most southerly distribution of any deer species, positioned a little further north than the Patagonian Huemul, a species also known as the South Andean deer. This species is found in the same genus as one other species, the Taruca, also known as the North Andean Huemul, which we'll cover next. The Patagonian Huemul is larger than its Andean cousin, with some sources putting it up over the 200-pound mark compared to the 140 pounds listed for the North Andean Huemul. This species is just one of 10 that have a population listed by the IUCN. There are thought to be somewhere between 1,000 to 1,500 mature individuals found at elevations ranging from sea level up to 3,000 meters in the Andes mountain range. Herd size varies between subpopulations and season and can range from small groups of 2 to 3 in areas with low density, herds of 11 to 17 individuals observed in autumn and winter, and historically this species has been documented in larger herds numbering 50 to 100 individuals in the winter. Predators include the puma, one of the most wide-ranging wildcats, as well as domestic dogs and humans. The geographic split between the two Huemul species is quite similar to that of the Pudus, with the range of the Taruca or North Andean Huemul stretching from Peru in the north to Argentina in the south. This species also has a population listed by the IUCN, with somewhere between 4,100 to 5,700 mature individuals thought to exist between the four countries. Interestingly, they state that the total population estimate would be 15,750 to 21,000 individuals, and that the number of mature breeding adults is calculated according to a conservative effective population size of 25% of the total population, which is quite handy to note for other population estimates. While both Huemul species are significantly larger than the Pudus, they are not the largest cervids on the continent. The Marsh Deer is South America's largest, and in my opinion the most spectacular species, with most sources citing a weight of around 270 pounds, around 50 pounds more than the larger Patagonian Huemul. As one might expect, the marsh deer is predominantly found in wetland habitats, a stark contrast to the mountainous terrain used by the Huemuls. These lowland regions include marshes, swamps, and flooded savannas, and provide ample aquatic and riparian vegetation which make up the majority of marsh deer diet. This species is considered solitary, but may be found in small groups numbering 2 to 5 individuals. The marsh deer is quite similar in more ways than one to another of South America's cervids, the Pampas Deer. Both of these animals possess a lighter coat, with white facial highlights that differ between individuals, and have a very similar range, being found in the same countries with the exception of Uruguay. The marsh deer can be most easily distinguished by the areas of dark hair on the lower legs and around the nose. The Pampas deer, on the other hand, is most easily distinguished by its more uniform light coat and an area of white hair on the rump, which is similar to that of North America's white-tailed deer. This species has the third largest population size of the 10 that are listed, with somewhere between 20 to 80,000 mature individuals. The Pampas deer is found primarily in grassland and savanna habitats, and despite being present in the Pampas grasslands of Argentina, the largest populations are thought to exist in Brazil, specifically the Cerrado and the Pantanal. Gestation is roughly the same as the Pudu at around 213 days, after which a single fawn is born, most often in the spring, which in South America is between September to November, although this can occur in any month. The Pampas deer is much smaller than the marsh deer, with most sources citing a weight of just 90 pounds, which surprisingly could make it lighter than the first of the 15 brocket species we're about to explore. Although several sources list the weight of the red brocket as between 55 to 65 pounds, multiple sources cite a maximum weight of up to 140 pounds for exceptionally large males. The red brocket has the largest range of any of the South American deer species, being extant and resident in 12 countries, from Colombia and Venezuela in the north to Brazil and Argentina in the south. Breeding can occur throughout the year, and like many deer species, juvenile red brockets are born with white spots. They are usually weaned within 6 months and reach sexual maturity at around 12 to 13 months of age. In the tropical forests of South America, this species is subject to predation from jaguars, along with pumas and humans. Despite its large range, there is relatively little information known about this species, and it is categorized as data deficient, a conservation status it shares with just one of the total 10 brocket species listed by the IUCN. Collectively, the brockets make up one of 2 large genera in this family, the other being the Munjaks of Asia, which we'll cover later on. However, unlike the 13 Muntjac species, which are all agreed upon by the IUCN and the Mammal Diversity Database, the brockets represent the vast majority of the difference between the 2 databases, so we will of course cover all of the described species. The first difference between the 2 databases surrounds our friend, the red brocket. The Colombian Red Brocket is located in Colombia, Ecuador, and possibly Venezuela. It is said to have split from the common red brocket and includes populations previously attributed to the Central American Red Brocket, which we'll cover later on. There is also the Southeastern Red Brocket, another species thought to have split from the common Red Brocket, which is located further south in Brazil, Paraguay, and Argentina, 3 countries that also play host to our next species, the grey brocket. This is the first deer species we've explored so far, after a total of 10, to be listed as least concern, which is attributed to its relatively large distribution, its occurrence in a number of protected areas, and presumed large populations, which although they are thought to be declining, are not doing so at an alarming rate. The grey brocket is smaller than the red brocket, with most sources citing a maximum weight of between 40 to 55 pounds, or halfway between a Pampas deer and a Pudu. Breeding again occurs year-round, and juvenile grey brockets also possess white spots, something that is thought to aid with camouflage from predators, which for this species includes the ocelot, despite this wildcat being smaller in size. The grey brocket is referred to by some as the southern brown brocket, reserving the name grey brocket for a different species present in Venezuela, which confusingly is thought to have split from our next species, the Amazonian brown brocket. This species is found in the second most countries of all of the South American species at 9, but due to its location in the depths of the Amazon, it was difficult to find photos for, so we shall move on to the first of the smaller brocket species, known as the Dwarf Red Brocket. This species is quite similar to the northern Pudu, possessing the same black facial mask, and is also not far off the same size, with most sources citing a maximum weight of 33 pounds, which is the same as the southern Pudu. The Dwarf Red Brocket is also referred to as the North Andean Red Brocket, found between the ranges of the Merida Brocket to the north, which is considered by some to be a subspecies, and the Peruvian or South Andean Red Brocket to the south, leaving just 2 dwarf brockets left to explore. The Brazilian dwarf brocket is also known as the pygmy brocket and is found in just 3 countries to the southeast, overlapping with the range of the small or Atlantic forest red brocket. Having explored 11 of the described brocket species, we have just 3 left to explore, the first of which bridges the gap nicely from South to North America. The Central American red brocket is one of only 2 deer species found across all of Central America, the second being the white-tailed deer, which we'll cover shortly. All of the sources that I was able to find put the maximum weight of the Central American red brocket at a consistent 70 pounds, making it a little larger than the grey brocket, but smaller than South America's common red brocket. This species is also subject to some taxonomic debate, with the Mammal Diversity Database making the distinction between this species, which they refer to as the Mexican red brocket, present in the northern part of its range, and the Central American red brocket, found in Nicaragua, Costa Rica and Panama. To the north, the Yucatan brown brocket is the last of the brocket species, and in keeping with the rest of this group is subject to some debate regarding which genus it is placed in, something that is thankfully not the case for 2 well-known species found in the contiguous United States. The white-tailed deer is found in the same genus as the mule deer and is visually quite similar. However, there are a few key differences between the 2, making them easier to identify. Counterintuitively, it is the mule deer that possesses a white tail, which has a recognizable black tip, with the exception of one subspecies which we'll cover later on. The white-tailed deer, on the other hand, takes its name from the colour on the underside of its tail, which looks quite spectacular when erect. In males, the facial mask is also quite distinctive, with the mule deer exhibiting a bright white muzzle and a dark area on the top of the head, in contrast to the darker muzzle of the white-tailed deer, which has more distinctive areas of white around the eyes. In females, the most distinctive characteristic is the size of the ears. Mule deer have larger ears, which is supposedly where they get their name from, possessing similar ears to those of a mule, whereas the ears of the white-tailed deer are smaller. The range of these deer and the number of subspecies is also quite different. The white-tailed deer has an enormous range spanning 2 continents, found from Canada in the north, through Central America and into South America as far south as Peru. It has an equally large number of subspecies, 38 to be exact, according to research published in 1991 and referenced by more recent studies. Examples include the key deer found in Florida and the Colombian white-tailed deer found in Oregon and Washington and named after the Columbia River. The white-tailed deer is listed as least concern, with the IUCN even stating that the main problem in the USA and Canada is overabundance, being considered pests in some areas. Perhaps linked to this issue, it is one of the few deer species listed by Animal Diversity that exhibits an average offspring of 2 rather than 1, an increase which occurs after the first breeding cycle. Fun fact, although the original Bambi was a roe deer, Disney's depiction is a white-tailed deer, which presumably was more relatable to the American audience. Although most sources cite a maximum weight of around 300 pounds, there are reports of extremely large bucks measuring upwards of 500 pounds. This is a similar story for the mule deer, which is also commonly cited as weighing no more than 300 pounds, although there are reports of larger bucks. The range of the mule deer is smaller than that of the whitetail, being found further north up to Alaska, but limited to just 3 countries on the west coast, venturing no further south than Mexico. The mule deer also has a large number of subspecies, although significantly less than the white-tailed deer. There are 11 subspecies mentioned in a 2021 study, which is one more than is listed by multiple other sources. Subspecies include the Colombian black-tailed deer, the Rocky Mountain mule deer, which is present in the US and Canada, and the California mule deer. This species is also listed as least concern, but unlike the white-tailed deer, doesn't appear to have any Reddit threads dedicated to what a pest it is. It is one of only 3 species whose population is listed as stable, the other 2 being the white-tailed deer and the critically endangered Bawean deer, which we'll meet later on. It is at the top of the mule deer's range where we bump into our next species, found almost across the entire width of the northern hemisphere. The moose is listed as extant and resident in the 3rd largest number of countries at 22, and is the first of 7 deer species we'll explore to have a population that is increasing. While these accolades are impressive, the claim to fame of the moose, however, is its position at the top of the weight chart. The Guinness Book of World Records lists a maximum weight of 1,800 pounds for an individual in Canada's Yukon, measured in 1897. This is far larger than any other deer species and, for the sake of comparison, is around the same weight as a chunky African buffalo. Moose breed once a year in September and October, a period that sees the usually solitary bull moose battle it out with their enormous antlers. After a gestation period of around 8 months, 1 to 2 offspring are born in May to June, each of which weigh around 30 pounds, or the same as a fully grown southern Pudu. The moose is one of a handful of species to be found in the boreal forest, and one of just 2 whose range is predominantly found in this biome. It also exhibits the 2nd most northerly distribution, with only 1 other species being found further north, with the range of the caribou or reindeer stretching far into the Arctic. This species has the 2nd largest population size of the few that have one listed, with an estimated 2.9 million mature individuals found between 8 countries, in addition to being introduced to 3 other areas: Iceland, the Falkland Islands, and South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands. Despite this large population, the reindeer is classified as vulnerable, having experienced a 40% drop in population size in the 10 to 25 years before it was last assessed in 2015. This species is referred to as reindeer in Eurasia and caribou in North America, and is unique for the fact that both males and females grow antlers, a characteristic that is generally found only in males in other deer species. The weight of the reindeer differs between subspecies. Remarkably, the Guinness Book of World Records even has a page dedicated to the smallest reindeer subspecies, which they state as the Svalbard reindeer, weighing no more than 200 pounds on average. On the other end of the scale, the largest reindeer, which aren't generally attributed to a specific subspecies, can weigh up to 700 pounds, putting them in the top 5 heaviest deer species according to my research, an accolade that is also shared by our next species, which comes in second. The elk is one of North America's most iconic species, found in some of the most well-known national parks on the western side of the continent. These enormous cervids are commonly cited as weighing up to 1,100 pounds in the largest bulls, although there are reports of Alaskan elk weighing up to 1,300 pounds, according to Wikipedia. This species is also referred to as Wapiti, a name that means white deer in Shawnee, a Native American language, referencing the lighter coat color of the species. Confusingly, the name elk is often used in Europe to describe the moose, which is from a separate genus. This species is thought of as social and in the summer is found in large herds numbering hundreds, even thousands of individuals. Thankfully, these beautiful creatures are listed as least concern and are another of the few species currently listed as having an increasing population size. Although the most well-known populations of elk are arguably found in North America, at least for the Western audience, the range of this species stretches into Asia, where they are listed as extant and resident in 6 countries, as far north as Russia and as far south as Bhutan, providing a nice segue into the world of Asian deer. Asia is home to no less than 10 cervid genera, including the Munjaks, the deer of the Axis and Rusa genera, and several others found both in Asia and Europe, where our journey will end. The elk is most closely related to 4 other species in the Cervus genus, and is where our exploration of Asian deer species begins. The Sika is one of Asia's most iconic species, and is famously found on the Japanese archipelago, but its distribution is also dotted over mainland Asia, most notably in China and Russia, as well as being introduced to 17 countries, as far-reaching as the United States, several European countries, Madagascar and New Zealand. The Sika exhibits a large amount of variation in its coat colour, possessing a much darker coat in the winter, a time when its white spots are less obvious, and a lighter coat in the summer months, which accentuates its bright white spots, a coloration similar to that of India's Chital, as well as the 2 species of fallow deer. According to an article published in Mongabay, there are thought to be almost 600,000 Sika deer in Japan, and due to the lack of natural predators, with the Japanese wolf going extinct over 100 years ago, this is another deer species that is considered to be overpopulated, causing deer-induced injury to the forests of many of the country's national parks. Although the Sika shares its genus with other cervids such as the elk and the red deer, this species is much smaller, with most sources citing a maximum weight of no more than 240 pounds, which is a little less than our next species, also found in the same genus. The white-lipped deer, also known as Thorold's deer, is commonly cited as weighing over 300 pounds in the largest males, and some sources cite a maximum weight of over 500 pounds, which would put this species in the top 10 heaviest deer. It is not weight, however, that makes the white-lipped deer unique. Due to its distribution on the eastern side of the Tibetan Plateau, this species is found at the highest elevations of any deer species, venturing up to 5,100 meters and no lower than 3,500 meters. It is at these higher altitudes where this species is subject to predation from the snow leopard, in addition to grey wolves present at the lower end of its altitudinal range. As its name suggests, the white-lipped deer is most easily identified by the white hair that surrounds its nose on the tip of the muzzle. Being confined to the Tibetan Plateau, this species is extant only in China, a country that also hosts our next species, found in mountainous regions to the west. The Tarim red deer, also referred to as the Central Asian red deer, along with the names of several well-known subspecies, including the Kashmir stag and the Bactrian deer, exhibits one of the lowest population estimates of those available, with an estimated 2,000 to 2,500 mature individuals remaining in the wild. Despite this low number, the global population of Tarim red deer is on the rise, and this species is listed as least concern. It is visually very similar to the red deer, found mostly in Europe, and is another species that makes the top 10 heaviest deer list, with a consistently cited weight of upwards of 500 pounds. Having explored 4 of the 5 species in this genus, we will save the red deer for our trip to Europe and move on to our next Asian genus, which contains one of the most visually spectacular species. The Chital is India's pride and joy, with the vast majority of its range sitting within the country's borders, in addition to being extant and resident in Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal and Sri Lanka, and introduced to 11 other nations from Argentina to Australia. The Chital exhibits one of the most iconic coats, a reddish-brown with white spots, a pattern that is present from juveniles all the way up to fully grown adults. In contrast to many of the species previously covered that breed in fall, Chital commonly breed between April and May, although this can occur year-round. Gestation is in line with other species at around 7.5 months, and females most often give birth to a single fawn. This species is on the larger side for the members of this genus, but compared to some of the other species we've covered already, can be considered a medium-sized deer, with most sources citing a maximum weight of around 200 pounds, which is around the same weight as a Patagonian Huemul. The Chital is visually unique from the other members of its genus, the first of which is found to the north, in the foothills of the Himalayas. The Hog Deer, also referred to as the Indian Hog Deer, is one of the most heartwarming species on this list, yet can be surprisingly large. Most sources put the weight of this deer at no more than 110 pounds, making it a little larger than a Pampas Deer. However, multiple sources state that exceptional males can top 200 pounds, making the largest hog deer the same weight as a large Chital. Regardless, their fawns are just as adorable as one might expect, exhibiting white spots like many other species that fade with age into their uniform dark brown coat. Predators of the hog deer include the golden jackal, which is present throughout much of its range, along with the wolf. Tragically, this is another of the 6 deer species to be listed as endangered, with a 50% decline in population in the last 20 years. However, this is one conservation status above our next species, which is visually very similar. The Bawean Deer is one of only 2 species to be listed as critically endangered, with an estimated mature population of just 200 to 500 individuals, the smallest of those with an available population size. This species is roughly the same size as the hog deer, with most sources citing a consistent 130 pounds, although the antlers of the hog deer are more impressive in my opinion. Not one to be discouraged by the insults of a human, when it comes time to mate, male Bawean deer duke it out with their miniature antlers, and after a normal gestation period of 7.5 months, a miniature Bawean deer is born. This species is found only in Indonesia, located on a single small island north of Java, much like our final axis species found on a single island in the Philippines. The Calamian Deer is visually similar to both the hog deer and the Bawean deer, and shares a conservation status of endangered with our next species, the first of the 4 species found in the Rusa genus. The Visayan spotted deer exhibits one of the most unique appearances of all deer species. The body is similar to that of a Chital, with white spots dotted across a reddish-brown coat, whereas the area forward from the shoulder is similar to that of an elk, transitioning to a darker colour around the neck and head. It is one of the most iconic species in the Philippines and is displayed prominently on one of their banknotes. The Visayan spotted deer is similar in size to the hog deer, with some sources listing a maximum weight of around 130 pounds, but others suggesting that the largest males can weigh up to 180. With just 700 mature individuals thought to remain, this is the 4th species we've explored to be listed as endangered, found only on 2 islands in the central Philippines, a distribution that is surrounded by our next species present throughout the rest of the archipelago. The Philippine deer, also known as the Philippine brown deer, is quite similar to the Visayan spotted deer in terms of weight, with most sources suggesting this species usually tops out around 130 pounds, but can reach up to 200. The coat of this species, however, is a solid brown and is doing slightly better than its spotted cousin, with a conservation status of vulnerable. Interestingly, on Spanish-speaking websites, it is referred to as El Sambar Filipino, the Philippine Sambar, a miniature version of our next species, one of the largest cervids in Asia. The Sambar deer is another of Asia's most recognizable deer. It is listed as extant and resident in more nations than any other Asian species at 15, being present throughout much of South and Southeast Asia, as well as being introduced to Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and the United States. It is also one of Asia's largest species. Although most sources cite a maximum weight of 660 pounds, which is roughly the same weight as a reindeer, and would still be more than enough to put it in the top 10, there are reports of Sambar deer as large as 1,200 pounds, which would make the largest males as big as an elk. This species is present in a wide range of habitats and elevations, found anywhere from sea level up to 3,900 meters, and in the forests of South and Southeast Asia is subject to predation from the tiger. The sambar is thought of as a solitary species and is most often found alone or in small groups, and although all of the footage in this video is taken during the day, the sambar is considered to be crepuscular or nocturnal. Having now covered 3 of the 4 deer found in the Rusa genus, we have one species left to explore, found on the Indonesian islands of Java and Bali. The Javan deer, also known as the Javan Rusa, exhibits a lighter coat than the sambar and is smaller in size, with most sources suggesting a maximum weight of between 250 to 350 pounds, or around the same size as a marsh deer. Although this species is extant and resident in just one country, Indonesia, it has been introduced to 10 other nations, the majority of which are Asian or Australasian, with the exception of Brazil. It is not mentioned whether these introduced populations contribute towards the estimated 10,000 mature individuals, or if they are taken into account when assessing its conservation status, which is currently set to vulnerable. The Javan deer is another species thought of as nocturnal, but in contrast to the sambar deer, is thought of as gregarious, most often congregating in smaller herds numbering 10 to 12 individuals, but can be as large as 25. If you thought the coat of the Javan deer was beautiful, I'd like to introduce you to the Barasingha, a species that is quite similar to the marsh deer in more ways than one. Also known as the swamp deer, the Barasingha is found in grassland and wetland habitats and exhibits one of the lowest maximum elevations, venturing no more than 300 meters above sea level. The largest portion of the range of the Barasingha is found on the border of India and Nepal, the only 2 countries where this species is now present. It is one of the largest species in this family, commonly cited as weighing over 600 pounds, making it not far off a normal-sized sambar. This species is thought of as gregarious, commonly observed in herds numbering 10 to 20 deer, but these groups can be as large as hundreds of individuals. The Barasingha is found in a small genus with only 2 extant species, the second of which has particularly unique antlers. Eld's deer, also known as the brow-antlered deer, exhibits antlers that project backwards and forwards from the base, similar to those of the fallow deer, which are much thicker. This is another species whose coat colour changes from season to season, being lighter in the summer months and darker in the winter, particularly in males. Eld's deer is roughly half the size of the Barasingha, with the majority of sources listing a maximum weight of around 330 pounds. It is found in a handful of countries in Southeast Asia, most notably in Cambodia and Myanmar, and is possibly extinct in Thailand and Vietnam. Eld's deer is the second to last species we have left to explore, with a conservation status of endangered, and as if life couldn't get tougher, It is subject to predation from both leopards and packs of dholes, one of Asia's wild dog species. Despite these hurdles, Eld's deer is doing significantly better than our next species, the only cervid currently classified as extinct in the wild. Père David's deer is endemic to China and is named in Western literature after a French missionary, zoologist and botanist, Père David, who sent evidence of this species back to Paris in 1866. At that time, a small herd remained in a royal hunting garden. In 1900, the remaining deer were killed during a rebellion, but not before being introduced to private collections in the UK, Belgium, France and Germany, from where populations were sent back to Beijing in 1956. This species is the only member of its genus, and in terms of size is larger than Eld's deer, but is smaller than the Barasingha, with most sources agreeing on a maximum weight of around 440 pounds, which is over 10 times the weight of our next species. The water deer is the fourth smallest species of the 40 for which I was able to find reliable data. It is slightly larger than the southern Pudu and the Dwarf Red Brocket, with most sources suggesting a maximum weight of around 40 pounds. These tiny, colourful creatures are extant only in 3 countries: China, North Korea and South Korea, as well as being introduced to France and the United Kingdom. As its name suggests, the water deer is commonly found near aquatic habitats, including coastal plains, salt marshes and riparian areas, and in their natural range they are preyed upon by several carnivores including the Amur tiger, the Eurasian lynx and the brown bear. As you may have noticed, this species exhibits tusks similar to those of the musk deer, which are part of a separate family and not considered to be true deer. This isn't, however, a truly unique trait in this family, with one other species exhibiting this vampire-esque characteristic. The tufted deer is more than twice the weight of the water deer, although it is still considered to be one of the smaller deer species, with most sources suggesting the tufted deer weighs no more than 110 pounds, which is similar to the normal weight of a hog deer. The tufted deer is extant only in a single country, China, where it is found at some of the highest elevations up to 4,700 meters, but has a much larger range than that of the water deer, stretching across most of the southern portion of the country, up to the border with Myanmar, where its presence is uncertain. From the smallest genera on the continent to the largest, we have now arrived at Asia's answer to the Brockets, a genus for which the taxonomy is thankfully a lot more simple, containing 13 species of Muntjac, starting with one of the smallest. Fayer's Muntjac is one of the most recognisable Muntjac species, sporting a multicoloured toupee, along with a multicoloured tail. This species is named after an Italian explorer and zoologist, Leonardo Fayer. As previously mentioned, it is one of the smaller Muntjacs, with most sources agreeing on a maximum weight of around 50 pounds, or roughly the same size as a grey brocket. This species is the first of 7 Muntjacs to be listed as data deficient, but is known to be extant in Myanmar and Thailand, with its presence uncertain in China, where we bump into our next species, which has also been introduced to the United Kingdom and France. Reeves's Muntjac is less colourful than its toupee-wearing relative, exhibiting a more uniform reddish-brown coat, with some dark facial highlights that extend onto the horns. While this species is considered to be a small deer, as are all of the Muntjacs, by some accounts it is a little larger than Fayer's Muntjac, with the largest individuals weighing up to 60 pounds according to multiple sources. Breeding in this species occurs year-round, and you'll be pleased to know that I was able to find this video of a baby Reeves's Muntjac. This species is the first of 3 Muntjacs to be listed as least concern, something that can unfortunately not be said for our next species. The hairy-fronted Muntjac, also known as the black Muntjac, is another toupee-wearing member of this genus, and is the only Muntjac species with a conservation status of vulnerable. It is found in a single country, China, a nation that also hosts our next species, which exhibits the largest distribution in this genus. The northern red muntjac is found in by far the largest number of countries of any muntjac species at 13. All muntjacs are primarily found in forest habitats, but the northern muntjac also frequents savanna and shrubland habitats, and is known to be an important species for seed dispersal, specifically in China and Thailand, but presumably throughout its range. Fawns exhibit white spots across their red coat, which fade with age, and sexual maturity is usually reached within 12 months. This species is a little larger than Reeves's muntjac, with a maximum weight of around 77 pounds, which is the same as the southern red muntjac. These two species were previously considered subspecies of the red muntjac, but were given full species status in 2008. The southern red muntjac exhibits much the same physical characteristics of the northern red muntjac, but most of the photos that I was able to find of this species have darker legs than those found to the north. The distribution of the southern red muntjac is less extensive, being found in just 4 countries, which is still more than any of the other muntjacs, with its distribution starting on the Malaysian peninsula and extending onto the islands to the south, including Sumatra, which is also home to the Sumatran mountain muntjac, and Borneo, which is home to the Bornean yellow muntjac. Having explored over half of the muntjac species, we must now head back to the mainland to touch on 6 species for which there is unfortunately very little information or media. All of these species are centered around Southeast Asia. The critically endangered large-eared muntjac or giant muntjac is found in Cambodia, Laos and Vietnam, a country that also hosts the Phu Huat muntjac and the Annamite muntjac, which is also found in Laos, along with Roosevelt's muntjac. The remaining 2 species are both found in Myanmar, the Gongshan muntjac, which is also found in China, and the leaf muntjac, also found in India, leaving just 5 species left to explore, of which 2 pairs have Asian and European counterparts, which we'll discuss in succession. The European roe deer, also known as the western roe deer, is the first of 3 species found throughout the European continent, and is the last species we'll discuss with a published population size by the IUCN. There are estimated to be 15 million mature European roe deer found across the continent, the largest of any of the published estimates, although this doesn't necessarily mean it has the largest population, with only 10 species with a published estimate. The European roe deer is one of the smaller deer species, with most sources suggesting that the largest males weigh no more than 77 pounds, which is exactly the same size as the red muntjacs we explored earlier on. This species was the original inspiration for Bambi, and on the subject of fawns, the European roe deer exhibits a higher than average number of offspring. A 2013 study states that the average number of born fawns is 1.5 to 2, and other sources suggest the average number is 1.6. Found throughout the majority of the European continent, the European roe deer is present in the greatest number of countries of any deer species. It is extant and resident in 49 countries, which is over 8 times the number of its Asian counterpart, although one of those countries is Russia, which is enormous. The Siberian roe deer, also known as the eastern roe deer, is extant in a total of 6 countries, but is present at higher elevations than its western counterpart, venturing up to 3,300 meters. While the Siberian roe deer is still considered to be on the smaller size in terms of deer species, it is significantly larger than the European roe deer. The most common maximum weight I could find was 130 pounds, making it almost twice the weight, and animal diversity lists it as even heavier. Like the red muntjacs, the Siberian and European roe deer were once considered to be a single species, but were found to be distinct by a number of studies starting in 1985, a similar timeline to our next pair of Eurasian deer. The common or European fallow deer has one of the most unique coat and antler combinations in this entire family. Its broad antlers are most similar to those found on a moose, and its lighter reddish-brown coat is most similar to species such as the Chital. Its coat can also vary considerably in colour, and was the only species for which I was able to find photos of melanistic individuals exhibiting a black coat, leucistic individuals exhibiting a white coat, and various shades and combinations in between. The common fallow deer is medium in size, with almost every source agreeing on a weight between 205 pounds and 220 pounds, making it a tad smaller than the Sika deer. Although the fallow deer is listed as extant and resident, or extant and origin uncertain in just 12 countries in southeastern Europe, it is introduced in a further 37, the most of any deer species, bringing the total up to 49 countries, covering almost the entire European continent, a number that is the same for the European roe deer, and significantly more than its Asian counterpart. The Persian fallow deer is extant only in a single country, being found in small regions of Iran, and has been reintroduced to Israel. Unlike the two roe deer species, which are different in size, the Persian fallow deer is the same weight as the European or common fallow deer, and the Visit Iran website even listed as slightly larger. The Persian fallow deer completes our list of the 6 species with a conservation status of endangered, although on a positive note, its population is thought to be increasing, something that can also be said for the global population of our final species. The red deer exhibits the second highest upper elevation of any deer species, conceding the top spot to the white-lipped deer by just 100 meters, but the red deer exhibits the largest altitudinal range, present from sea level all the way up to 5,000 meters, which presumably occurs in the Caucasus region of its distribution, a mountain range that hosts the largest peak in Europe, Mount Elbrus, at 5,642 meters. This impressive species is also one of the largest. Most sources put the maximum weight of the red deer around 550 pounds, which would still be enough to enter the top 10, but multiple sources cite a maximum weight of over 750 pounds, putting it easily in the top 5, and Wikipedia suggests that stags in the Carpathians can weigh 1,100 pounds, although I wasn't able to verify that source. The female red deer, in my opinion, is one of the most recognisable, with its large, long head being similar to that of a horse. In males, the antlers of the red deer are some of the most impressive, with its thick, dark branches and white tips. The red deer is extant in the second largest number of countries at 38, but its disappointing performance in the introduced category means the red deer lands in third place for the total number of countries present at 44, 5 behind both the European roe deer and the European fallow deer. It is, however, the only species to be listed as extant in North Africa, a continent that is largely devoid of native deer species, but is home to 6 species of wild pig, all of which you can learn about in this video, exploring all 20 species of wild pig. Thank you so much for watching.